Hey, I said, don't bet on me unless you're paying me some percentage. I'm doing all the work. That's how I feel about it. You know what I mean? Like I work my ass off every day. You know, I'm trying to support a family with this, and I think they should put a like some type of clause, like 3 or 5% of what you make goes to the fighter. You know, so
Mhm.
that's how I think they should do it because we're the ones putting our lives on the line. We're the ones, sacrificing everything, training all day long, losing a social life, all that type of stuff. So yeah, if you're betting on me, I want some of it.
All right, so crazy things are going down in the UFC world right now because just this past weekend there was a very bizarre shift in betting odds for Isaac Dulgarian versus Yadir Dalvaye, which was so blatantly suspicious that multiple sportsbooks are now refunding bettors who put money down on this fight. Not to mention, Isaac went out there and lost quickly in the first round where he looked like an absolute amateur while doing so, and the commentators even talked about how badly he fought. And surprise, surprise, this guy has just been released by the UFC for completely unrelated reasons, I'm sure. To make matters worse, rumors began to circulate on Sunday that the UFC was alerted by the FBI of up to 100 cases of fight fixing this year where even one of the referees has been implicated in the scandal. This is not the first case of something like this happening in the UFC, but it definitely has the potential to be the biggest, and yeah, in this video I'm going to talk about all this and more. Okay, right off the bat, I definitely think there's something fishy going on here with this fight. Like, there is just no way that the lines would have moved as significantly as they did just a couple of hours before the fight by sheer coincidence. This graph from Bet105 shows that a couple of days before the event, Dulgarian was as high as a -270 favorite. However, about 3 hours before the event starts, Dulgarian's opponent gets a huge surge of bets placed in their favor, indicating that a massive amount of money was being put down. That's already suspicious enough, and I was already seeing rumors being spread that this fight was fixed before it even started, but what makes things look so much more obvious is that this guy fought like complete dog shit. He couldn't complete a takedown that he really should have been able to finish, he let Dalvaye get to his back without any opposition, and he barely even tried to attack the hands as he was getting choked. This shit was fixed, and listen, I'm really not the type of guy to be screaming fix every time a fight looks kinda weird. I have been listening to fans say for years that fights like Conor McGregor versus Donald Cerrone, John Jones versus Cyril Gane, or Robbie Lawler versus Nico Price were fixed, but I frankly don't think any of those fights looked all that rigged. But this fight right here is one of those few times where all the evidence screams fraudulent, and I'd be willing to place a bet via Prize Picks that Dulgarian took a dive. And I don't know if Isaac told some people close to him that he was going to lose on purpose and to bet the house on him, or maybe he made a deal with some shady organized crime syndicate where he agreed to lose by first round sub. What I do know is that the combination of the swing from the betting odds mixed with his terrible performance are huge red flags that something suspicious took place. Like, look at this fucking graph, this shit just doesn't happen organically. Also, just going back to the clip at the beginning of the video, what sort of idiot would say that he deserves a cut of bets placed on him only to then get himself caught up in what is definitely a betting scandal? Why would you even entertain a conversation about betting if you knew you were going to get mixed up in trying to fix your own fight? Anyways, listen to what Michael Chiesa had to say about the fight.
But a lot of like day one mistakes. I mean, you can even hear in the broadcast, like, what is this guy doing? I mean, you peel the top hand, you don't punch behind you. That is the most useless strike you could possibly throw. I'm sitting here on the pre-show hyping you up as a guy that could go into the top 5 and win fights. And it doesn't even look like you could fight somebody in the bottom of the top 500. I got to be honest here, that was a F- performance. It was absolute trash.
Now, outside of the irony that Michael Chiesa is saying this, aka a guy who I've seen get choked out like half a dozen times without ever fighting the hands, I agree with every word he said. I refuse to believe that Dulgarian was skilled enough to fight his way into the UFC, rack up a 7-1 record, which really should have been 8-0 because I think that his loss to Rodriguez was a bad decision, and still not know the basics of defending a rear naked choke. There are bad performances, and then there are suspiciously bad performances, and this fight here is one of them, so much so that Caesars and William Hill US are offering refunds to those who bet on the fight, and DraftKings issued a statement saying they're investigating the situation. And just last night, Ariel Helwani reported that Dulgarian has been cut by the UFC. Like, geez Louise, talk about ruining your life. I don't know how much Isaac got paid to kamikaze his career, but I know it wasn't enough. So out of curiosity, is nobody else getting heavy flashbacks to Derek Minner versus Shailan Nurdimbeka? Because this all feels like a straight up rendition of what happened there. There's the betting odds moving significantly on the day of the fight, there's the first round finish where the loser barely even put up a fight, and guess what? Both Isaac Dulgarian and Derek Minner were both coached by James Krause.
And then tell me where you train. You're based in the Midwest, Kansas City, I believe, or
I
are you?
originally started training in Kansas City at Glory MMA, and now I'm out in Denver, Colorado at Factory X, under Coach Mark Montoya.
Does Glory MMA exist anymore, or did James have to shut the whole thing down?
Uh, yeah, they exist. I don't know any fighters. There's no UFC fighters there, but they still do their cardio kickbox and
Yeah.
teach people how to fight and stuff. So
You keep in touch with them anymore, or did everyone just distance themselves? I see you selling real estate or something like that.
and I was told I'm not supposed to be in contact.
Oh,
That's all I really know. I just moved out
wow.
here. I just moved out here to Denver and, start training under Mark Montoya and just kind of stay in my lane out here.
If you're somehow not aware of who James Krause is, then just know that he's probably the most disgraced MMA coach of the modern era. Back in 2022, he started doing public interviews where he bragged about how successful of a bettor he was and that he made so much more money from betting on fights than he did coaching or fighting. And as a means to make more money, he then created a Discord channel where people paid a monthly fee to gain access to his betting picks, and according to him, his Discord community was making money hand over fist by tailing his bets. When I first heard him talk about all this, I did think it sounded a bit strange, but I figured that if he was placing bets on his own fighters, he would at least be betting on them to win, which I guess there's nothing wrong with. And as most of us already know by now, just a couple of weeks later, Krause would be put under federal investigation for potentially but definitely revealing Derek Minner's injury to his Discord so that his followers could place bets against him. As a result, Krause was and is still probably being investigated by the FBI. He was banned from coaching UFC fights ever again, and his Discord channel was shut down. Now, I'm not saying that Isaac Dulgarian picked up a trick or two from his former coach, but anyways, if all of this hasn't been weird enough, just one day after the fight, a rumor started being spread that the UFC was flagged by the FBI for rampant fight fixing all from this year. I cannot emphasize enough that for now, all of these are just rumors, and honestly, I'm not even sure how much of this I actually believe, but I think it's an interesting topic, so I want to talk about it. Regardless, the idea that 100 fights from this year were fixed just seems a bit extreme because that's like 25% of all the fights that have taken place in 2025. I do fully believe that there's probably a lot more shady fights happening that we don't know about, and maybe I'm just being naive here, but I really don't want to believe that 1/4 of all UFC fights are fixed, but who knows, maybe they are. And besides the Dulgarian and Minner cases, the only other case of presumed fight fixing in UFC history was Taehyun Bang versus Leo Kuntz, and even then, Bang didn't even go through with taking the dive, but still ended up going to jail anyways. That aside, I am not so naive to the point where I really believe that there's only been 3 fixed fights in UFC history. The only reason that we even know of these cases is because they were masterminded by some of the biggest idiots known to man. If these guys actually had more than 4 brain cells, then they wouldn't have gone about trying to fix their fights in the most obvious ways imaginable. That being said, I can only imagine how many fixed fights fly under the radar every single year because the people behind them know what they're doing and know how to go about it without being caught. And you know what? The most interesting part about this FBI investigation rumor is that apparently UFC officials have been accused of being a part of fixing fights, with Jason Herzog being called out by name. Who knows if this is actually true, but if the UFC is knowingly fixing fights, the first people we have to look into aren't the refs, it's the fucking judges. We really gotta look into the judges because I honestly have an easier time believing that these dumbasses are personally fixing fights themselves than the entire organization working together. Like seriously, if the UFC was going through the trouble of fixing up to 100 fights a year, then why would they let Bilal Muhammad being a champion ever happen? If Dana was knowingly fixing fights, then Sean O'Malley, Joe Pyfer, and Conor McGregor would all be champs. But what I do think is possible is that there might be a small number of officials in the UFC who might be abusing their power to influence the outcome of fights in order to benefit them financially. I mean, especially with judging in particular, it's so hard for me to accept that our judges are still this bad at doing their jobs to the point where the idea of them having vested financial interest in the fights doesn't seem all that unreasonable to me. Especially seeing as all the judges have been doing this for a while now, I can see a reality where they've gotten away with profiting off their bad decisions for so long that they feel like they'll never get caught. But when it comes to the refs, I personally think it's less likely that there's a circle of corrupt refs who are taking part in fixing fights. And I understand that referees have a massive influence on how any given fight plays out, but I genuinely just feel like they're sincerely bad at their jobs, whereas the judges could be insincerely bad. But honestly, who knows? The UFC could just be one big corrupt company and everything we know is a lie. And as someone who's a fan of basketball, I think it's pretty crazy that all this UFC betting stuff is happening at the same exact time as the NBA being investigated by the FBI, where many current players and even coaches are suspected of rigging betting outcomes. And I literally just googled NFL betting scandal, and it looks like professional football also had a very similar situation happen in 2023. And when NBA and NFL players who are getting paid tens of millions of dollars a year to throw a ball around are rigging games, then I promise you that these UFC fighters who are barely making minimum wage have done it too. And in that sense, I don't even think I can blame fighter pay for when guys like Dulgarian and Krause try to profit off their own fights. I just think that crooked people will try to take advantage of an opportunity if given the chance. And especially when it comes to betting, which has taken over the world recently, I can imagine there's a ton of temptation for pro athletes to fudge their numbers to make extra money. I'm absolutely not condoning it, but I'm just saying it's such an easy system to manipulate given how little oversight there is. And the hard part is, I don't even know how the UFC or any other sporting promotion for that matter can solve their athletes taking advantage of gambling. They can very easily have their family or friends make bets on their behalf and then go out there and underperform, which I'm sure is happening right now. And if fighters are smart enough to go out there and not make it obvious that they're throwing, then they can still have plausible deniability by saying that they were injured or had a tough weight cut, which is why they underperformed. But at least in this case with Isaac Dulgarian, all signs point to him knowingly being a part of fixing his own fight, and I am very, very interested to see how this plays out. Anyways, that is the video for today. Definitely let me know what you think about this past weekend's controversy. Do you think that Dulgarian knew what was going on, and do you believe that the FBI is investigating the UFC? As always, if you like the video, then like the video, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so. I appreciate you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.
People ask me, well, what were they talking about? Somebody was saying, well, what's the UFC going to do? We let these guys know not to bet on fights. Do you know what the outcome of this is? Like, if I penalize them, you get cut. They're going to go to fucking federal prison. Federal fucking prison. If you're that fucking stupid and somebody else wants to do it, knock yourself out. There's not enough money in it to ruin your life and not go to jail. Go to federal prison.